Councillor Hawkins, we're now live streaming.
Thank you very much. Good evening, members. Good evening, officers. Good evening, any members of the public that are joining us. Welcome to the Planning Applications Committee, 17th of December 2020. Firstly, can we have apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies from Councillor Barnett. Councillor Galliford is subbing in his place.
Thank you for joining us, Councillor Galliford. Are you agreeable that I sign the minutes of the last meeting? Thank you. Don't recall being such a long meeting. You slipped something else in?
No.
Sorry about this, folks.
I thought that as well.
What was that? Thank you. Thank you very much. Declarations we will deal with on each item, which takes us through to item number 1 on page 15, the land to the rear of 42 Station Road, Frimley. On declarations, I'll point out that this has been brought to the Planning Applications Committee by the Executive Head of Regulatory, as the applicant was a Surrey Heath Borough Councillor. I would also make a group declaration for those of us who were councillors with the applicant. I think there are still a few of us that were there. And finally, the applicant has been in contact with myself. Are there any other declarations to make? Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you. I need to declare that I do know the owner of the land. I have exchanged comments with him regularly on social media, although not in connection with this matter, and I go into it with an open mind.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ratteram, did I see you indicate?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I know Mr. Allen, we were fellow councillors. Pertaining to this application, Mr. Allen emailed the borough at least 2 times, and I was copied in those emails on 2 occasions. On one occasion, he expressed concerns to the borough in one of those emails. I asked the borough to look at those concerns. I think because of this, I will not be voting on this application.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? Councillor Wheeler?
Can I just mention something to Councillor Ratteram? Councillor Ratteram, can I suggest that in this situation you abstain, because there's no facility as such not to vote at all? Just to say.
Yeah, that was my intention. Yeah, to abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, I mean, it is really, just want to absolutely clarify, obviously David was a member of our group for a period of time, but actually I feel quite offended he's not contacted me at all. So I have nothing else to declare other than the fact that obviously we served together in the chamber for a period of time.
Thank you. I'd rather sweat that up in my earlier statement, but thank you for clarification. Right, and then Mrs. Bishop, please.
Thank you, Chairman. May I have the slide?
Slide, somebody? No.
Next one, please. Next one, that's it. The applicant, oh, back one, please. And then, The site location, the first one. That's it. The application site is in Station Road in Frimley. As you will see from the selected plans on the screen, you can see the application site, which is to the rear of 42 Station Road, with access to the side. And you will see on the right-hand side of the plan in front of you that we have an existing plan showing trees, hedges and fences, although you'll see from the photo that at the time of my site visit, the situation had changed slightly, but not materially. Next one, please. The proposal before us this evening is to erect the building to the rear of 42 Station Road to comprise 4 two-bedroom flats. Pedestrian access to the property is down the side between 40 and 42 Station Road, which leads to a little courtyard area to the front of the building itself, and then there is a side access which leads to amenity space for all 4 flats. This gives an indication of the accommodation that's being proposed. As you will see, we have got 2 flats per floor. There is an emergency access to the rear, which is the external staircase. Your living accommodations is the front of the building, with the bedrooms. This is the building that is being proposed. You can see the existing dwelling that is 42 Station Road to the right of the top plan, and then you have the proposed building to the left. Underneath you have got the front elevation behind the proposed green screen, and then you have another plan with the green screen removed, so you've got a sense of what the building will look like. Thank you. This is looking at it from the other side, so this is if you were looking at it from 40 Station Road. So you can see the buildings with the louvers over the windows, the decorative panels at first floor, and you can also see the external staircase. You can see the rear of the building there, which is access, which also provides access to the rear gardens as well. Next one, please. These are pictures of Station Road. So this is on the left-hand side. You can see the pedestrian access that will lead to the proposed flats, and then you see a general picture of Station Road. As you can see, there is an existing parking issue in that area. Next, please. This is looking at the left-hand picture is looking at the rear boundary from standing at the back of 42 Station Road. And the picture on the right is standing at the back of the site looking back towards 42 Station Road. This is coming up a little bit closer, so you can see the relationship between 40 and 42, and you can also see the side access, and you can also see the side window and the side elevation of number 42 Station Road as well. Next one, please. This is looking across, these are views from the adjoining gardens. So on your left you have the view from 40 Station Road, and on the right you have the view from 44 Station Road. The building will be right on that boundary, pretty much. The issues are set out in the report in terms of the impact on the character of the area, impact on residential amenity, the residential environment that's being created, the impact on the Thames Basin Special Protection Area, the issue of parking, and there is an update which is provided on the update sheet regarding drainage. I've received the drainage comments from our drainage engineer, and he's raised the objection on the grounds that there's insufficient information within the application to demonstrate that the proposal would not have an adverse impact in flood risk terms on both the application site and also on neighbouring properties. To that end, we are also proposing a further reason for refusal number 6, which is set out on the update sheet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bishop. Members, any questions or comments? Councillor Tapper. I beg your pardon. Sorry. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. I do apologise. I haven't even read my script here. We have 2 speakers. Firstly, which are both by video.
Yes.
We have two speakers by video. Firstly, there is Mr. Mark Brown, who is objecting to the application. You can't hear him. I know, before anybody comes in and says. No.
Sound. If you stop shift and then share. And then you need to put share computer screens.
Okay. I'm not sorry.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to
No.
speak to you.
No.
I speak as a resident of number 40.
What about the sound button on the bottom right? There's a sound volume up. Bottom left. No.
You need, if you put the headphones in as well.
Eddie, I think I'm going to have to mute the chamber or you're going to be fed back.
Okay.
If it's of any help, Mr. Chairman, on the second attempt there, or the last attempt, you could hear the speaker very faintly.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the committee.
I will,
I would like to thank you for
before we
giving me
begin with that, I'll just unmute us here. Okay.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the committee. I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you about this matter. I speak as a resident of number 44 Station Road, objecting to this proposal. Both my own and neighbours' objections are covered extensively within the planning officer's report. Firstly, regarding the site, the land to the rear of 42 Good evening, Chairman and members of the committee. I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you about this matter.
Eddie, I'm able to try sharing it from here if that's easier. I've just got your message. Bear with me, members.
Again, on that final attempt, Chairman, I could hear the speaker perfectly well.
Me too.
Can we have the screen back, Kate, please, or somebody? Members.
Sorry, Councillor Hawkins, the video is still running. Do you want me to stop it?
No, I think what we're going to try and do is go to the second item. We can't hear it here.
Right.
And do the second item and maybe come back to that because we can't hear that. So members, if you'll bear with us, please, we'll go to item 2 on page 43 of the agenda. I can't do my writing. Is it Laurel Farm, Fairfield Lane West End. On declarations, are there any in respect of this item? No declaration, thank you. And Mr. Callan, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, refer members to the update, just one amended condition following a consultation response. So we'll move on to the first slide, please, when we're ready. Thank you. So here you have the application site in red. The wider Laurel Farm site in the applicant's ownership is in blue. It's located on the northern side of the Fairfield Lane cul-de-sac, which is unadopted of Benner Lane in West End. It sits opposite a housing reserve site, which is now implemented, but set back considerably from the laneway by a private access drive. The site as a whole is within the greenbelt outside of the defined village settlement. So next slide, please. So here you have the existing site plan. The site is relatively flat and comprises residential cabins along with barns, stables and shed buildings facing the yard area. And there is garden, grazing and paddock areas to the north and west. So next slide, please. We have some photos of the private access. On the left is taken from Fairfield Lane, and you see the neighbouring dwelling of the Laurels to the side. So next slide, please. And you have 2 photos of the application building as a whole. So on the left photo you have sheds and coops, and adjoining these is a larger barn building shown on the right photo. Next slide, please. The final set of photos showing a separate stable building and then a taller shed building beyond and to the north. And these are roughly opposite the application building. The right-hand photo faces back towards the site access and towards Fairfield Lane, with the white-clad building forming a neighbouring rear garage. And finally, just the next slide, just have existing plans before we move to the proposal, showing the existing building in question. So next slide, we have the proposed site plan for the replacement building to provide a dwelling. The main elements would contain a crown roof, but it would still remain single story, as we'll see soon on the elevations, and at a significant distance from Fairfield Lane. Also of note is the comparison with the approval 20/0098 on the right hand side. There's no change to the siting and roof design. We'll look at that and then in the next slide, please. You have the approved elevations and floor plan. So this allowed for the change of use, alterations and extensions to the existing building to provide a dwelling. The approved additional maximum height is 1.06 meters. This is above the existing roof form, which is hatched in blue on the elevations. And the approved additional footprint is also highlighted blue on the floor plan below, bottom right there. So next slide, please. You'll see the proposed scheme, the different plan order for whatever reason, but in terms of footprint, height, siting, design, and internal layout, it is of the exact same as the previously approved proposal. This current scheme tonight is, however, for a full replacement building rather than extensions and alterations. So the traditional rural design features would therefore remain, and the dwelling would continue to sit well within its rural setting, which does include some higher surrounding roof forms. So the recommendation is therefore to grant permission subject to the conditions in the report and as updated. This is because the previously shown extant permission, along with a previous prior approval for conversion to 2 dwellings, are considered to amount to very special circumstances that clearly outweigh the by definition harm to the greenbelt. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Allaway, you called this application in. Can I ask you just to briefly explain to the committee why you did that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The call-in was initially based on residential development in the Green Belt, which is in principle inappropriate. I've narrowed down the concern to the points of harm and very special circumstances with Ross, and grateful for his input right up to today. Harm is addressed by the analysis of the metrics of size, shape and use by the officer, which can be considered as not resulting in any significant harm to openness. Regarding the claimed very special circumstances, though, the 0.15 year deficit in land supply is negligible, in my view, in respect to the Green Belt Protection Policy. 1 dwelling is an insignificant figure, and there is an abundance of housing available on the reserve site on the opposite side of the lane. Some unsold, so there is no unmet need locally. In the borough perspective, while there is redundant commercial proper brownfield sites and sites with planning permission waiting for construction to start, there is less need to compromise the green belt. In fact, I was just noting in the previous application, it mentions that the 0.15 deficit in 5-year land supply, in that case, doesn't support the approval of that particular application. But just moving back to this one, the application is to supply open market housing. So I would say that the very special circumstances isn't proven. According to MPPF paragraph 144.145, exception D is the only one of concern in this application, which is the replacement of a building, provided the new building is in the same use. In which it appears is not the case, as it's currently a barn, not an existing habited converted barn. So I've got some couple of questions here, which officers may be able to answer for me. Question one would be, if the proposal was to demolish an agricultural barn and erect a permanent brick built house, would it be granted? If the MPPF doesn't have to be complied with, we can presumably argue deviation elsewhere. And would we be safe, on safe ground, going against the MPPF without compelling reasons? If there is any doubt, I would propose defer on this application till members are clear on the grounds for their vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. To try and answer the list of questions, First of all, generally speaking, proposal to demolish an agricultural building for a dwelling has to be a case-by-case assessment. I'm obviously aware of an appeal decision that went against redevelopment of greenhouses for a number of dwellings elsewhere in the borough. But that's a different set of circumstances. Obviously, greenhouse buildings are different types of building to what's in front of us. And what is the key material consideration in this site is the extent prior approval for conversion of the existing building to 2 dwellings, and then the more recent planning permission for alterations, extensions to provide 1 dwelling. So I think this goes on to the second question, querying I think why the NPPF does not need to be required. Well, the chapter 13 concerning the Greenbelt does say that development can be allowed if there are very special circumstances that clearly outweigh the identified harm to Greenbelt. And so in this case, the report does acknowledge that it does not meet paragraph 145D because of a different use as a replacement building. However, very special circumstances are outlined in section 7.10 beginning at page 48. I know you mentioned, and I know you queried the 5-year land use, that is referred to in 7.10.5, but it is accepted there that it's only for 1 dwelling and of no greater provision than what has been approved. The next paragraph says that more crucially, the proposed replacement building would have the exact same footprint, height and volume as the extended building approved and as shown on the slides. No greater impact on Greenbelt, and are identical in all other respects. So given that this fallback position along with the other prior approval, very special circumstances are therefore considered to exist, and that is allowed under the NPPF as explained. So I hope that explains the reasoning for the recommendation, and please let me know if there are any other queries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. A number of points to go through. So first and foremost, it isn't just greenhouses. It's any agricultural building is not deemed to be detrimental within the green belt, because it is for the very nature of the type of environment that we're in, i.e. it's agricultural. And so therefore the barns weren't detrimental in the green belt, but a house, by nature of the change of that use from an agricultural building to a house, is deemed to be detrimental to the green belt, unless very special circumstances apply. The very special circumstances that we're using is the extant planning permission. I have already, Councillor Hawkins is aware of my view on this. Very often in the chamber, I will say, but what about that application? And what invariably comes back is that we must consider each application on its own merits. And if we consider this application on its own merits, we have got an increase in roof height of almost 1/3, which by the very nature has to mean that it is going to have a negative impact on the green belt. And in addition to that, my understanding, and I apologise profusely if I miss it, because I have looked very carefully, but on the extant planning permission, it did make a comment that if it went ahead and went beyond a certain size, which it does now, because instead of being 2 separate buildings, we've got a single building, there should be a habitats regulations appraisal before anything was granted. And I'm sorry if I've missed it. And I'm sorry if the guidance on that documentation was incorrect. But I can't see that habitats regulation appraisal in there. So on that alone, I don't think we're at the stage that we can grant it. I think it's really disappointing that we are using the extant planning permission as very special circumstances to grant this application, because this is yet another example of a planning application in this borough that is a planning application by stealth, i.e. what they want, if they came in and applied for at the beginning, they wouldn't get. So they do it by a series of changes to granted applications. And I think if we use that as very special circumstances, we are going down a very slippery road to poor development. So I'm sorry, I don't see the very special circumstances for this. It is without doubt overdevelopment in the green belt, and it is the conversion of an agricultural building, which by nature of its use is not deemed to be detrimental in the green belt, into housing with no clear, very special circumstances, which is. So I'm very sorry, I cannot support this application for those reasons. And if you could just come back on the habitats regulation assessment, please.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the previous planning permission for 2 dwellings. That was a prior approval procedure, and you obviously have to consider certain, not the full kind of assessment under planning, but you are right, there is a section in the order that requires the applicant to submit to seek discharge of the habitats regulations. But obviously, as that scheme has not been that scheme has not been implemented for the 2 dwellings, that has not taken place, and that's just a requirement under those regulations. So with the subsequent planning permission for 1 dwelling, a payment was secured to contribute towards management of SAG that was based on the number of bedrooms proposed. And that is carried through to the current application. So I hope that explains. Thank you.
Councillor Allaway, I'm rather conscious you were going to come back earlier, I think you, and I rather cut you off for for Councillor Wheeler. Did you want to come back in again?
Yeah, that's okay. And thank the officer for the clarifications, although I'm still not convinced on the special circumstances being met. The dangerous position is going against exception D. Now, if the MPPF can be gone against, then fine, but it opens up a lot of opportunities. Well, if we can go against it here, can we go against it in other places? And I kind of don't think the conditions have been satisfactorily met to accept a change of use straight from a barn to a brick built house. The fallback position was the barn conversion, which you do see quite a lot. But where you've gone from barn to brick house, I mean, it's almost like the one. It's not hidden, not shielded. It's not been done what do they call the word? It's out of sight. It's not been done in that respect, where the housing, where the barn has now become a house, but it was all shielded. It's not as obvious as that, but it is that big change from a barn to a house, and the exception D I don't think is met, so I'd be very reluctant to go against that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else wishes to? Councillor Dugan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want a clarification on this very special circumstance. So, as I read it, and as Councillor Wheeler said, the special circumstance is simply that we have a prior approval which is at the same size and scale. But in order for that approval to have been met, there will have been, I presume, what I would call proper special or very special circumstance. Does the original very special circumstance still exist? They're often extremely particular to the applicant, to do with the health of the applicant, etc., etc. Now, if that was why we gave planning permission, and that special circumstance no longer exists because it's a completely different applicant, and I don't know whether it is or it isn't, then I don't believe that very special circumstance still exists, and they can crack on and build what they've got permission for if they still own the building as previous. But I kind of agree that this is development by stealth.
Thank you. Is there anybody else before? And ask the officer to come back in. So looking to just a moment, please.
Thank you, Chair. The background, to try to clarify further, the first application was for prior approval under permitted development regulations. So there was no need for a case for very special circumstances. The considerations were quite relatively narrow in terms of highways, etc. So we've seen this issue with other applications before, that the local authority is often tied to having to grant prior approval. Nonetheless, it remains as a legitimate fallback position. And then the 0098 planning application was for alterations and extensions to the building. Now, I appreciate what Councillor Wheeler said, is that ordinarily, yes, we would consider agricultural buildings in a different way. However, you had that realistic possibility of its conversion to 2 dwellings, so that changed the assessment. So the footprint extension was 9% and the volume is 28%. That would ordinarily be considered not disproportionate, but obviously we had a change of use, so it did not meet 145D. But because of that prior approval, very special circumstances were considered to have been demonstrated to outweigh that by definition harm from the change of use. So again, if you move forward to the current application, it's the same quantitative increases are in play, but it is as a replacement building rather than extensions, and that really is the only change. So we still believe that there is a case to grant planning permission. I'm trying my best to clearly explain the background. My apologies if it's still on here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, just to come back on that, the prior approval application was for a building of the same size, exactly the same size with no increase. And that was the one that did require the habitats regulation approval. The one that then came in is for a slightly bigger building, but still very much agricultural in nature. Its appearance, its depth, it's a conversion of an agricultural building to allow habitable accommodation in size. This is a new building in the Greenbelt, and it is knocking down an agricultural building to build a new home within the Greenbelt. And therefore, it really does, I feel, need those very special circumstances. And we simply can't pin them on prior approvals. It needs to stand up on its own merit.
Just to clarify, the impact on the Greenbelt is in respect of its size primarily, and obviously the visual impact, which is also an indicator of openness. In this particular case, there's approval before you for exactly the same size building. There is no difference. So yes, it might look different in appearance, but in Greenbelt terms, the appearance of a building per se is not the issue in terms of the harm to the Greenbelt. The issue is actually primarily the size issue. And that's why the planning history gives you very special circumstances in terms of this scheme.
Sorry, Chair, can I just also make a point, please? The external materials also include timber cladding, which was the same as the previous planning permission, and we do have a proposed condition that to confirm all external materials. So we have that control to achieve a more rural looking building in appearance. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I was going to ask for clarification on that from the pictures. Councillor Wheeler, did you want to come back in?
I will just come back in very quickly, if I may. An agricultural building is not seen to be detrimental within the green belt, full stop. This is not an agricultural building. So whether it's bigger, slightly smaller, or whatever, it is a new building within the green belt. And that's what the green belt policy says, that an agricultural building does not create harm.
Right. Councillor Dugan.
Thank you, Chair. In the pack, page 59, you've got the existing plans, which are then drawn onto the proposed plans on page 60, and they are demonstrably not the same. So either you've produced the wrong existing plans, or it's not the same size, or I've totally misunderstood what the difference between what an existing plan is and a proposed plan. And I'm still struggling with the fact that in order to have turned an agricultural building into a dwelling, there will have to have been very special circumstance, whenever that was. And I suspect, looking at the planning history, it wasn't the most recent one, it was the one before, 1906-09, because that seems to be where we've given permission for a dwelling. What was the special circumstance? Because that's the bit I'm getting at. Just the fact that we gave special circumstance back then and recognized it, and we're now sort of forgetting whether or not that still exists, and are now just saying, well, just because we gave prior approval, I don't think, well, to my mind, I'm sure the inspector will tell me otherwise, that doesn't constitute very special circumstance.
Just to clarify in respect to the 2019 approval, that's not a planning application, that's a prior approval under permitted development process. So the tests are very different. You are not considering in the same way as you would with a regular planning application, the full impacts on, for example, residential amenities, for example, on the green belt. Completely different tests apply. And under the prior approval process, it's quite limited actually what tests we can actually consider. Ross, do you have to hand what those are from your recollection?
Sorry, off the top of my head, it's highway safety,
contamination and flooding. It tends to be.
Yeah, external appearance, I think. With on the plan pack, that the confusion might have been that I didn't include the subsequent 200098 plans, which are obviously the exact same as what's proposed tonight. So that's a kind of a step in the middle that's missing between page 59 and 60. So well, hopefully that helps too.
Yes, Councillor Dugan.
Yeah, thanks. So if I understand this correctly, then, if you've got a barn in the countryside, within the bounds of whatever this application is, there is the opportunity to turn those barns into dwelling houses without producing the need for very special, in fact, producing a highways plan, what it sounds like, and you can turn two barns into two houses. And then you can subsequently come back and say, well, because I've got that, I can now build this instead. And as we say, we get into planning creep. Is that correct? I mean, if it is correct, then fair enough. I don't see that we've got very much choice. If we turn this down, it goes to appeal, will be found against and they'll get permission. But is that the journey? Have two barns, apply for permitted development, turn them into two houses, then stick in an application to knock them down or do something different and create a house, and then turn it around and turn it from two houses into one house because you've merged them together.
So to clarify again, the permitted development rights, which the government now allows, is very wide ranging, and it does permit sort of the conversion into two dwellings under the use class. And that's what that first that first prior approval application was considering. There was nothing to do with very special circumstances under that 2019 consideration. By the time then we had the 2020 application, the only reason why we had to consider very special circumstances with that proposal was because whilst the additions were not disproportionate in size, i.e. the extensions, it was because it was a different use under the MPPF. But because the reuse of that building has already been established in the 2019 consent, we effectively have nowhere to go. And because the size increases were not disproportionate, we considered under that 2020 application that very special circumstances existed. The fact now we're in this scenario where they're replacing that building with the identical size building is therefore that extent permission we have to take account of it, because actually the harm to the greenbelt remains the same, whether or not you permit this proposal or they go ahead and do the 2020 approval, which they can do at any time.
And that 220 approval is for 2 dwellings, and this is for 1 dwelling. Yes?
No, sorry, the 2019 is the prior approval for 2 dwellings.
2 dwellings, 2019, but they could still build that.
Correct.
Because so they've got 2 extent permissions there. And we won't go down the route of prior approvals, which I think all of us hate. And I'm not looking at Councillor White for any comment whatsoever, but she knows where I'm coming from. There's clearly going to be some divergence of views, but we have an officer recommendation set out in the papers contained in the update. Is there a proposer and a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Rise, Councillor Dugan, sorry, Mr. Scott, I'm really taking your role over. Mr. Scott will read out the names, please.
So members, please could I have your votes on the officer recommendation plus updates? Councillor Graham Alloway.
Against.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
In favour.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
In favour. Reluctantly, brackets, close brackets.
Councillor Sharon Galliford.
Abstain.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
Favour.
Councillor Edward Hawkins. In favour. Councillor David Lewis.
In favour.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
In favour, reluctantly.
Councillor Robin Perry.
In favour.
Councillor Darryl Rataram.
In favour.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
In favour.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
In favour.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Against.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft. I'll take that as it in favour.
Yep, thank you.
And Councillor Valerie White.
A reluctant in favour.
Two against, 1 abstention. 12-2-1.
Yeah.
Members, that was carried. 12 votes for, 2 against, and 1 abstention. Thank you on that. Now, can you just bear with us, please? See if we can go back to the first item, the videos. Are we able?
Kate's going to try showing it from her laptop.
If not, I'm going to quickly join using my iPad, and we'll listen to it via my iPad whilst the committee are listening it to their other matters.
Are we able to hear it?
Yes, from what I can.
Councillors, I'm going to share the screen again. I've turned all my volumes up. Can I just ask at the start of the video, you just give me a thumbs up if you can hear it okay. We just need to make sure you can all hear it. And Eddie, do you want to find some way to get a message to me if we need to do it a different way from your point of view and I need to restart it or mute you guys in the chamber?
Yes, Kate, if it's okay, we'll try and listen to it via your screen sharing method. And if we can't hear it, if you quickly pause it, and then I will join and we'll listen to it through my iPad here.
Yeah.
We'll see.
No problem. So.
Yeah, ready. We're going to defer.
Yeah. Do you know?
Defer.
Can't hear anything.
Unfortunately, the sound on the video is very, very low. I can't turn it up any more than that.
Did you want to say?
When it was last time on Sean's screen, we could all hear it. I'm assuming it was just the chamber couldn't hear it then.
I can't hear it. Yeah, sorry, I can't hear
Okay.
it. We can't hear it here.
Let me just try this again. Is this any better? No, no, because I've muted it completely. That's not helpful, is it?
Members,
okay, I'm getting directions.
Members, can I just check that everyone not in the council chamber at the moment can hear the video?
No, that's incorrect.
No, we can't hear it.
No, we could hear it when you played it the first time round, but I can't hear it at all this time round.
Councillor Garrett or councillors, was it clear to you? You could fully understand the video.
When you played it about 10, 15 minutes ago, yes, it was quiet, but I could hear it and understand it, yes.
It was very difficult to hear 10, 15 minutes ago.
Okay.
So who's that said that?
Councillor Wheeler.
Councillor Wheeler, right. Just a second, please.
Okay, I think.
No. Yeah. Okay, members, we've reached a decision. I think we can't hear it properly. We are going to have to defer this item to the to our next meeting to get the videos so that they're clear and we can understand them fully. I need a seconder for the recommendation. Councillor Wheeler, thank you. I think everybody's in agreement with that this item is deferred. Reluctantly, but thank you for that. And we can work on that and get it back for the next meeting, which says that is the end of this meeting this evening. And Kate is going to come off take us off the